Okay, hello to everyone joining us from around the world. 200 of you from 36 different countries. We're so honored to have you as the audience for our very, very important webinar today. Before we begin, I have a few important announcements I've been asked to make. I'm Steve Zipperstein. I'm a professor at UCLA, and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Middle East Development, otherwise known as CMED. I want to thank very sincerely our various UCLA co-sponsors for this webinar, the International Institute, the African Studies Center, the Berkel Center for International Relations, the Department of Political Science, and my department, the Luskin School of Public Affairs, Department of Public Policy. Before we begin, I want to just share a few very, very important administrative announcements, just so that we all make sure that we understand the nature of the Zoom webinar platform, how it works, and so forth. We can see each other here in our studio, but we can't see or hear you. You can see us, but we can't see or hear you. We are, however, recording the presentation today for later viewing on the CMED website or YouTube, our Facebook page, and that recording will be available in the next couple of days. If you're joining us live right now via Zoom, please notice the chat window at the bottom of the screen. We'll use that window to share announcements during the webinar with you here in real time. However, please note that you will not be able to add comments in the chat box. If you do have questions, and we hope you will have a lot of questions, we have an amazing moderator and a wonderful panel for you today. So if you do have questions, please type them using the Q&A window, also found at the bottom of your screen. When you do type a question for us into the Q&A window, please make sure to include your name, your country, and your affiliation. And note that we will announce your name, your country, and affiliation if we're able to have time to put your question to our panelists. Want to make sure you all also understand that only ourselves at the CMED team will be able to see your questions. In some cases, we might answer your questions in writing in the Q&A for others to see, but the audience at large will not be able to see what you type into the Q&A. Only the amazing CMED team, I should add, our wonderful staff will be able to see what you're typing. We would ask, however, that you keep your questions as concise as possible so that we can get to as many of your questions as possible. If you're joining on the YouTube platform, please note you won't be able to ask a question because our staff have disabled comments on the YouTube platform. Okay, enough with the announcements. Time to get to our moderator and our panel, and it is my really great honor to introduce our moderator today, my dear friend, Mohammed Abu Bakr. Mohammed is a Sudanese human rights activist. You see him there on the screen with me now. He's a peacemaker with a decade and a half of civil society experience. Since high school, he's an amazing person. Since high school, he's founded and led organizations and initiatives focused on humanitarian, human rights, youth empowerment, and peace programs across the Middle East and Africa, including in South Sudan, Egypt, and even Israel and the Palestinian territories and beyond. It is my great honor and pleasure to hand over right now to Mohammed Abu Bakr. Mohammed, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, Center for Middle East at UCLA, for making space for this important conversation, yet one that rarely find a platform, the war in Sudan, the lesser known war. On April 15th of last year, the war broke out in Sudan and between the armed forces and the Rapid Response Force led by this very same generals who together staged a coup against the transitional government of Sudan, effectively ending Sudan's inspiring transition to democracy and ended the hopes and dreams of millions of young Sudanese who peacefully led, um, led, 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 a movement that resulted not only in removal of the dictator, Omar al-Bashir, but also set the country on track for incredible and promising reforms. Yet these hopes and dreams were shattered in October of the year before, when these two generals who are now leading the war in Sudan started a war, staged a coup against that transitional government. Um, the war in Sudan happened, now is entering its 14th month, so meaning that it started in between the war in Ukraine and the current war in Gaza, yet received very little attention over the last 14 months, if at all, not only from media, but also from policymakers who demonstrated ability to be, more outspoken on violations and on atrocities that takes place elsewhere. So to shed light on that war and why this little coverage, we couldn't have asked for a better trio of activists and of experts who are here today with us. And without further ado, I would like to invite our speakers one by one to present to our audience today. But I would like them to make their presentation framed around specific questions. The first question is being, where are we now? The war has, been raging for 14 months with very little updates available on what is going on the ground. So we'll start with our first speaker, our first panelist, Mr. Hamid Khalafallah, who should be on the screen right now, and who is a development practitioner, researcher, and policy analyst, and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Manchester. Mr. Khalafallah, please unmute and go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you so much to Siemens for organizing this very timely panel. As you mentioned, it has been more than 13 months now since the war erupted in Sudan between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudan Armed Forces. And what has essentially started as a power struggle between two generals has now turned into a full-blown war with actors, transnational actors in the region and beyond, playing active roles in sustaining the fighting and fueling the ongoing war, with high risks of the situation deteriorating in a countrywide civil war. And we have already seen very painful signs of civil war in specific parts of the country, particularly in Darfur. So the war is still ongoing more than 13 months later at full speed and expanding in new territories every day. And in that regard, the latest development on the ground now is the siege of Al-Fashir city, which has been ongoing for quite some time now, the capital of North Darfur, with RSF besieging the city essentially, and and continuing to attack citizens there who are mostly people who are IDPs themselves, internally displaced people who sought refuge in Al-Fashir after many other all other cities and other parts of the Darfur region fell under the capture of the Rapid Support Forces. So these people are already extremely vulnerable, and now with the attack and the besiege of Al-Fashir, they remain under even further risks. More than 1 million people actually now, and there are serious signs of genocide underway while people are trapped in Al-Fashir in what is essentially now a kill box, basically nowhere to escape to. And as the Rapid Support Forces continue their offensives on the city and surrounding villages, and also in return the SAF and other allied groups and so on are using Air Force, which overall resulted in so many civilians losing their lives just by being caught in the crossfire. It's estimated that at least 200 people were killed in the last couple of days in Al Fashir, its own. So yeah, Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world currently. Uh, and it is estimated that at least 150,000 people were killed since the war erupted. But personally, I think that is, an underestimation of the actual number of people who lost their lives because there are no, adequate or accurate records to show us how many people were killed. Uh, According to the UN, to the IOM, almost 8 million people have been displaced since the war started. And that is on top of 4 million people who were already displaced before the war started due to previous conflicts and crises and so on. And at least 7 million people of those have been displaced within the country in Sudan and are facing very dire circumstances. More than half of the country's population, that is around 25 million people, are in need of immediate humanitarian assistance. And, on the other side, the international humanitarian response is gravely inadequate. And currently, many parts of the country now are currently facing a telecommunications blackout, which does not only impede people's ability to communicate with the outside world and so on, but it complicates and almost hinders humanitarian assistance efforts because this is a war-torn country basically. So the economy has become almost cashless, and people rely on mobile money to go about their daily lives. So that telecom blackout is causing serious risks to people. Also, in the same vein, there have been several incidents of both warring factions obstructing humanitarian aid delivery in so many ways, and that also complicates the situation even further. In terms of access to healthcare facilities, around 80% of the country healthcare facilities are either inoperable or inaccessible. And also, there's another very catastrophic issue, which is hunger. Around 18 million people, and that is a third of the country's population, are currently facing acute hunger, and 5 million of them are already in famine. And on the international side, I think, in response to this very disastrous and catastrophic situation that I just described, but I think the situation on the ground is even much more worse because, like I said, we don't get enough information because of the internet blackout in many parts of the country. But the international response, regrettably, has been, rather slow, fragmented, and basically lost a lackluster response to the war on different fronts. And there haven't been any serious efforts to disincentivize the warring factions from continuing the fighting. So yes, by all measures, Sudan is experiencing a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions. And I think it has, not only devastating impacts on the Sudanese people, but there is also, a ripple effect that could potentially go across the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and risking the security of the entire region, basically. And unfortunately, the world is looking away. I will stop here.
You, Hamid, and thank you for the sobering reminder of the scale of what's going on in Sudan. It was a slow burn war, but definitely in terms of scale, of atrocities, scale of devastation and long-term effect is by no means less important than any of the other wars currently going on around the world. And to tackle this same question, but probably from a more anecdotal angle, I would like to turn to our next speaker, Ms. Reem Abbas, Sudanese feminist writer, activist, and co-author of Undoing Resistance, and most importantly, my very dear friend. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks to all the other guests. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think how I want to start is I want to challenge the common framing of this conflict. I mean, many times in many media outlets, we hear that this conflict is between two generals. If it is between two generals, then I think the four of us here, Hamid, Muhammad, and myself, would not have had our homes occupied by the RSF militia, would not have had our homes looted, would not have lost basically a lot of things, and it's not only us, it's also all the families we know and all our acquaintances. We are talking about, if we're talking about Khartoum, for example, a city that had about 10.9 million in April 14th, 2023. End of 2023, the city had less than 2 million, and it had, so basically 8 million people or over 8 million people fled. Many people, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of homes that were looted. People lost everything. Markets burned down. A lot of our history and our present has been lost due to this war. So this is not a war between two generals, because if it is, I would not have people, sitting in my house right now, militiamen sitting in my house right now, occupying it. I would not have had a lot of the things and a lot of the things I cared about basically looted or taken away and so on. This is a very personal war. It has come into our homes. So this is a war against the Sudanese state. It's a war against the identity of the state. And it is a war that is, like I said, our past and our present is being taken away from us. Just to give you an example of what has been, just to give you some examples to understand the gravity of what I'm talking about and what has been destroyed. So many historical churches and mosques have been attacked and looted. Some of the oldest, religious, basically, religious entities and venues in Sudan have been attacked. The Ministry of Higher Education reported that over 30 universities were looted or damaged in Khartoum state alone. 104, okay, like 104. Governmental and private higher education and research centers were looted, damaged, or burned. Entire universities were burned. Research centers were looted, including the very important Mohammed Omar Bashir Center for Sudanese Studies, which had very rare manuscripts. This is why when I'm talking about our past, the manuscripts, the books that are so rare have been burned by of course, the RSF militia. Many universities have been looted. A lot of very important work has been lost. If we also go to heritage sites, the museum was looted. The museum was attacked. Mummies dating back to, thousands of years were tampered with. This is our history, our like the Nubian, history and the Nubian civilization. Heritage sites were, visited by the RSF militias who threatened, damage. The National Corporation of Antiquities and Museums, was looted as well. And right now you find Facebook groups that are selling artifacts and manuscripts dating back to hundreds and thousands of years. So our history is being lost, and we have seen attacks on so many different heritage and cultural sites, on museums. So this is why this war is a war on our identity. It's a war on the state itself. Cultural centers such as Abdul Karim Marghani Center were looted. The House of Heritage was burned. Books, so many warehouses and libraries were burned or looted. So when we talk about this war, let us not talk about it as a war between two generals, because this way we're not doing justice to the people of Sudan, who right now are losing just everything about them. And when everything is attacked, his heritage, civilization, education, the civilian infrastructure, and also, of course, our homes, you know, and all the things we cared about. It's becoming, it is a war on civilians. It is a war on civilians, and it is a war on women, because we have seen so many violations against women, violations that we have only seen in Iraq and Syria when ISIS was widespread there, you know, selling women, using them as sex slaves, selling them in markets. So this is a war on civilians, and it's a war on women. It is not a war between two generals. Thank you.
Thank you, Reem. Indeed, it's not war on two generals, between two generals, and definitely a war on our very identity as people. And not only that, if I may add, we are also seeing the characterization of it being a civil war, which in my opinion couldn't be more misleading as title. It is war on civilians, not a civil war that is going on in Sudan. Of course, war, like in Sudan, like all wars, doesn't always affect all citizens equally. Some suffer the wrath of war a lot more than others. Women don't experience war the same way men do. Sexual minorities don't experience it the same way. Ethnic minorities, more historically vulnerable groups, also experience it very, very subjectively. And to shed light on that, we'll turn to our next speaker, gender parity advocate and fellow of the African Middle East Leadership Project, Ms. Wiam Shogi. Wiam, please go ahead. Wiam, we will circle back to you while your technical difficulty is resolved. But meanwhile, I would like to turn back to our Hamid and Reem with the new question. You mentioned, Hamid, that signs of genocide are evident in areas like Al-Fashir. Reem spoke of Yazidi genocide-like actions being taken in Sudan. Again, the war essentially started as a war on democracy, not unlike yes, it's working. So we will circle back to you very soon. And yeah, I would like to know why, if any, why the international community, be it in the media side or in the policymaker side, seems to be reluctant to show any kind of solidarity with the victims of this war through meaningful coverage on one hand of what's going on, or through resolutions in international bodies like the UN, or in Congress here in the United States or in the European Union. Why this reluctance? Why this lack of action? Is it simply racism, or is it more complicated than that?
Sure. I can start by speaking a bit about why I think the media is ignoring the war in Sudan, and maybe Reem could come in to speak about why Western US policymakers are not giving the war in Sudan enough attention. And I think there are so many reasons why we could see this lack of coverage, in terms of what's happening in Sudan. Many people try to kind of attribute it now to the war on Gaza taking priority and so on, but the war in Sudan started 6 months before the war on Gaza started. So there was still no coverage over the 6 months that preceded that. So I think that's not really the thing. I think what it is particularly when it comes to media, but also in terms of international interest, unfortunately, there is a global order for how things work. There is a global hierarchy for countries and parts of the world that are more important than other parts of the world. This is related to geopolitics. This is related to the importance of specific countries for specific reasons. A lot of it could be read within the international hierarchies, the racist, the racist structures of the international media outlets, and so on. But I think also this could be also attributed to the fact that Sudan has been out of the global scenes for more than 30 years during the Bashir regime, and particularly when there were sanctions on Sudan and so on. So Sudan was very much isolated and no one knew what was going on in the country. So I think getting the media outlets to become more interested in Sudan will take more time. So yeah, it's been a low priority. But I think there's also a premise and assumption that, you know, the war in Sudan is more or less business as usual. It is expected, in a way, that Sudan will be in war, which is a very problematic, way of viewing the country, very dehumanizing, but also very ignorant, assumption and premise that dismisses the fact that this is not a war caused by the Sudanese people in any way, as we will, we can speak later about, more of the regional actors and so on. And I think one last point that I could add is that media outlets and international, the public in general, global public and so on, are more comfortable in dealing with very simplified narratives in a way where there's a good guy and a bad guy, and this is how you understand the war, and this is how you understand the situation, and that's it's easier to understand. But that's not the case in Sudan. So understanding the war in Sudan requires very nuanced reporting from international media outlets because it's very complex, it's multidimensional. As Reem also mentioned, has so many different factors and so on, and that requires very, like I said, nuanced reporting, which lacks on Sudan, and particularly with the lack of international journalists on the ground in Sudan. This is basically because of the lack of, it's not a priority, but also because of bureaucratic obstacles that are being, put in place by the warring factions. I can stop here.
Wonderful. And I actually would like to cover that complexity and the multiple actors seldom talked about. And for that, I want to turn to Reem. Who are these actors? Who's steering this war beyond the generals and beyond their obvious supporters? Who's less obvious?
Yes, I think it's very fair to talk about the international actors. And before that, I do want to mention one thing. The RSF is a cross-border, militia. So it also it's able to recruit and it's able to mobilize from outside the borders. So far, it's been able to mobilize from Central African Republic, Chad, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, Libya. So it's been able to mobilize from many countries because of the way colonial borders are basically in Africa. So a lot of groups and communities are spread out across a number of countries, and they don't make sense of colonial borders the way a lot of us do. So they have been able to kind of use this, this community of theirs that is spread out across the Sahel region to get fighters, and this is why you continuously have this flow of fighters coming into the country. But the other thing that is important is also the fact that there are a number of countries that are involved in this war. First of all, a lot of the weapons that are coming to the RSF are coming through Chad, neighboring Chad, and they're coming through an airport that is operating on the borders between the two countries, and they're coming from the UAE. So the UAE is the biggest supporter of the RSF militia, and for many reasons. The UAE wants Hemeti to be in power. Hemeti was he had a lot of business in the UAE. He was able to support the UAE and also Saudi Arabia in the war on Yemen, the war on Yemen, which is still happening. So he was able to also use this belt to kind of mobilize a lot of young men who are poor, who have no jobs, who have nothing to do, to go and fight on behalf of the UAE and Saudi Arabia in the war on Yemen. And at the same time, also to benefit from Sudan's gold. As you know, a lot of Sudan's gold, Sudan is a very rich country when it comes to gold and resources, is going to the UAE. And there's a lot of blood gold involved. The other thing is also that Sudan is strategic because the UAE and other countries, in the Gulf and so on, they see it as a potential breadbasket that can, that can secure the future basically of food security in the Gulf area. So there are a lot of reasons why Hemeti, taking over Sudan makes a lot of sense. But of course, the way they envision it is that it's going to be a DRC or a Congo-like situation where you have people, completely basically, enslaved, so they can just work the land and work to extract the resources to the benefit of different people, and of course, and have a government or militias basically that are just kind of doing this work on behalf of foreign agents without providing any services. And this is really what we don't want Sudan to become like. There are other also actors. We have seen, for example, the Sudanese army receiving weapons from Iran. We have seen that. And it's mainly because the army has not found allies in other countries, and it has not found allies in the general countries that it usually depends on, such as Egypt and so on. So it has been getting weapons from Iran over the past few months. The other countries that are also in the conflict somehow, other countries such as, we've seen some role for like Uganda and South Sudan, and it's mainly indirect roles, but weapons were passed through Uganda. We know that over the past few months, and this was emphasized in an article in, I think it was the Wall Street Journal. And we've also seen fighters and some items, food items and petrol and so on that is that is brought across the border from South Sudan to the benefit of the RSF. So it's definitely the more and more the war continues, the more you see more actors. I also want to mention that Wagner was very much present on the side of the RSF. So we have seen Wagner on the side of the RSF supplying them with different equipment, surveillance equipment and so on, and also intelligence and also ways of working and training. And we have seen also the Ukrainian special forces fighting and doing special operations against Wagner in Sudan with the support of the Sudanese Armed Forces. So any war could become a proxy war if it rages on long enough, and if basically a lot of people see interest in making it so.
Thank you, Reem, for peeling through that onion and layers of actors in this conflict. Again, something that I noticed is very little understood, even with policymakers I talked to who I assumed would know more. It turned out like even explaining who the players are is a real challenge when it comes to Sudan. As simple as it may sound to us, to many of the international actors, it's indeed a very challenging one to grasp. So at this point, I would like to actually ask all our speakers to turn on their cameras. And I would like to circle back to Wiam at this point. Please, Wiam, I will repeat the question I asked of you, which is the war in Sudan, like every war that ever took place anywhere in our planet, usually.
Okay, I hope you hear me well now.
Yes, it affects
Okay.
different groups differently. What is the effect of the last 14 months on women, on LGBT, on vulnerable communities and historically marginalized communities across Sudan? Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. As I said before, and no one hear me, I'm sorry for my technical issue. I'm gonna start with two stories. One of them is Bashir. His name is Bashir. He's been killed yesterday by the RSF militia because he's serving food, and they didn't allow anyone to even bury him. And another one, Taqwa. Taqwa, she's my friend, and today we're supposed to have our anniversary for 14 years of friendship. She lost her life because of the lack of oxygen. May Allah rest their soul in peace. And all the souls we lost because the kidnapping, raping, and killed an unsafe boy. That leading us to the different situation of the different group you mentioned before. I'm gonna say like a quick book, the discrimination against queer people. This war stopping hormone medicine for the transgender people and all the vulnerable sexual group facing harassment internally from the different community and outside, especially by the international organization. They should help them. They facing all the harassment and the sexual and reproductive health and lack of sanitary bath and the lack of clean water. Okay, and now we lost, or there's 219,000 pregnant women facing death and rape and unsafe birth. We need to ask from the international humanitarian aid, especially humanitarian aid, to generalizing the humanitarian aid. We need the sanitary bath, we need different solution. And if they want to do that, they should to communicate with the grassroots movement, not dealing just with the government. It's not even being with the people in the shelter house, but unfortunately, the government they send them out of the shelter houses and they've been in the street without food, without anything. And as Reem says, this war, it's against us as personal. It's against us. Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank you very much, Wiam. And yes, I would like to actually circle back to the question of international community and the response or lack thereof. And I would like you all to just, again, why is the US not acting the way it should be acting, or is able evidently to act in response to Sudan through the right resolutions, the right policies? Why is the EU not prioritizing Sudan or the crisis that it's going through, even though it will have a very direct impact on the EU, especially the European states' biggest anxiety, immigration, is certainly present with the Sudan conflict, as the number of displaced grows. So will the number of those arriving to Europe will increase? Why are we not seeing appropriate reactions or interventions? I would like to start with Reem on this one, and specifically to address the US part. As an American, it's important to me to understand what is going on and why are we not. It took more than almost a year to get an envoy appointed for this purpose. What is going on?
Yes, I think you have to start my camera or help me start my camera. I think I really want to be very specific when it comes to, Western countries in general, and I'm also going to talk about the US. I think for the West in general, it's just the way they do diplomacy now, and especially the US. The US has been deprioritizing diplomacy, of course, for the sake of, not necessarily militarization, but securitization of the way they do diplomacy. And this has been documented by many, US intellectuals and so on. But the way they deal with many countries, like Sudan, is they outsource diplomacy. So they outsource it to their allies. And their allies and their friends in the region happen to be, the Gulf countries mainly. So UAE and Saudi Arabia. And the UAE, because of its money and also because of its soft power, it has been, of course, investing a lot in like think tanks and, and the arts and so on. It has really increased its ability to become an ally and its ability to have kind of an impact. So yeah, like I said, the US is outsourcing its diplomacy to its allies and expecting them kind of to do this work with the same values, not taking into consideration that sometimes when your allies themselves, especially the UAE, are part of the conflict and are problematic. So right now, we continue to press, on the US and other countries and telling them that, you have to continue putting pressure on the UAE, but a lot is involved. The UAE is really just impacting and influencing a lot of politics around the world, and just so many things happening where they invite politicians to do lectures. They are investing a lot of money and resources to make sure that a lot of countries are basically always that they always have the interests of the UAE. The other thing that I also want to mention is there's a lot of misinformation, and actually I would call it disinformation when it comes to Sudan, and a lot of this has seeped into the US government. So right now you do have senior level diplomats within the US government who have really bought into this disinformation campaign that is being spread by the RSF and its allies, indicating that this is, a terrorist army, all its supporters are terrorists and they have to be fought. And the only way to save Sudan is to basically bring this, some politicians, who claim that they represent the Sudanese people. So unfortunately, this information has been sold because a lot of money again is invested, into making it happen, and it's making it very difficult for the diplomats to engage with any forces outside the forces that continue to claim that they are the legitimate force that represent the people of Sudan. Thank you.
Wow, I would like your reaction to that, Hamid. How do you view that? Is it working? Is really the characterization as a terrorist army of Islamists versus, the other kind of terrorist militia, genocidal militia? Is that narrative present in the halls of powers you are, more intimately familiar with?
I think there's a lot of confusion from the different international policymakers. Because I think they have always had this very problematic and shallow engagement with Sudan, which depends on either dealing with the military leaders because they hold the guns and because of the very securitized kind of approach that Reem just spoke about. Also, or like either military leaders or political elites who come in conventional structures that are easy to deal with and that are, they speak the language of international actors and so on. So this is one of the, fundamental and, reoccurring issues that hinder proper diplomatic engagement. And then with the war, there's the war that's happening on the ground, and then there's also a war of narratives, and everyone wants to define the war in a specific way. I mean, engaging with different policymakers, international, from different countries and so on, yes, I can see some buying into a specific narrative. Particularly, I think the idea is that the biggest fear is the return of the Islamists if the military continues being empowered and so on. And then others, seeing the other way around and so on. But I think there's all of these narratives are partially true. There is some truth to everything and that's why I say it's multifaceted. Like the rapid support forces are attacking civilians on a very personal level. They are, committing all these atrocities. That is important to be said and to be documented and so on. The influence of the Islamists on the army is happening, and it's important to be, thought about and so on. And I think the international community cannot engage properly without engaging with a wide range of civilians who would bring in all of these different views that need to be taken into account when thinking about the peace process. And I think that's why one of the key issues that we have been trying to advocate is that, the international community tries to engage with Sudan, and they keep on saying that we are engaging with civilians and so on. But when they engage with civilians, they engage with specific elites. In the current context with the group called Taqaddum, headed by the former Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and so on. And I'm not saying exclude them and don't talk to them, but do not treat them like the only legitimate representatives of the Sudanese civilians, when they have very little legitimacy inside the country. They have more legitimacy with international actors and foreign avenues and so on, but their legitimacy inside the country is very much has been damaged for years now. So I think having a better approach and being able to understand what the war is, and being able to grasp all these different narratives and how to tackle it requires proper engagement that starts with engaging with the right actors.
Very interesting. And just to piggyback on your comment, I would like to throw back a question again to you. Who do you think are the other civilian representatives that could be spoken to, if not Taqaddum? Because I do get this question a lot. So please.
So there have been different, it depends on what questions are you asking. So now there have been a lot of discussions about the humanitarian response and the humanitarian responders on the ground and so on. And then we had a recent conference in Paris for pledging and so on. On the side, there was a civil society seminar and so on that brought political leaders and not humanitarian responders on the ground. When the emergency response rooms, who have been at the front line of the humanitarian response for the past year and so on, are very much active, are doing the work that they need to do. Doing more than the work that they should be doing, actually, shouldering the whole humanitarian response on their own. So there is the emergency response rooms, and they're not all called the emergency response rooms, but they're different civilian-led mutual aid initiatives that are operating all over Sudan. There's the resistance committees who have been leading on the pro-democracy mobilization for the past 5 years. Obviously, now with the change of circumstances, their priorities have changed and focusing more into the more on the humanitarian side. But the political agenda and pro-democracy agenda are very much alive. There are various civil society groups, including university initiatives, that have come out throughout the past few months in the new centers of displacement now in Kampala, in Nairobi, and so on. There are different civil society groups that are trying to, get different initiatives up and running. However, these initiatives are not as, sharp and well put together like initiatives that have come from Taqaddum, for instance, because Taqaddum is being funded by the international actors, and they have been empowered to hop on planes and travel to different cities to advocate and so on. So there isn't a single conventional, organized, structured group that I could point you to. But there's so many smaller groups that, if empowered and if allowed a seat at the table, would bring a lot more than what political elites would do.
Thank you, Hamid. We have about 10 minutes left of this portion of the panel, and I would like to squeeze in 2 questions to our speakers in this time. But first of all, I want to give just context to our listeners who may not be familiar with the emergency rooms and resistance committee. Resistance committees are youth groups that for the past 5 years have actually been the de facto drivers of the democratic movement, but who had to turn themselves into the de facto aid providers during this war and conflict in Sudan. So democracy activists turned humanitarian have been filling their humanitarian gap in Sudan for the past 14 months. Again, access of aid and access for international organization is nearly non-existent in Sudan. And these groups have been filling that gap and keeping Sudan from descending into full-fledged famine and full-fledged chaos. Kudos to these young women and men all over Sudan leading that important work. And speaking of that, I want to actually turn to our speaker, Wiam, to shed light on some of the work being done by these groups and by these activist coalitions on the needs for women in particular in Sudan right now. Again, the war does not affect everybody equally, and some groups experience it harsher than others. So I would like to see what work is being hear from you, what work is being done, and what could be more could be done to support.
I'm sorry, Muhammad, because we are limited of time. I'm going to say something before go to the emergency room. We should to give a highlight this war affecting on women in systematic rape. There are up to 1,000 case rape being documented, and this is not actual number. And this systematic rape being filmed and published on Facebook or social media platform by the RSF militia. And this rape is starting from 12 years old as a children. And one of those children being pregnant and give birth now after 1 year of this war started. And there is a lot of orphan children. They have no houses, no families, and even no IDs. Back to the emergency room. They are heroes. Thousands of them working for nothing, just to helping people. They've been killed, been arrested, been kidnapping, and they provide water, provide the rape protocol. We lost it from the international community. No one give us. And there's a big lack and big problem to receive money, donation to Sudan, because the bank system, and Muhammad can say a lot about that, and they're collecting money, they try to providing food, and even there is no education now in Sudan. All the schools, it's shelter rooms, shelter places for the people, and those people even we film them a lot of time, but even it's not that safe to talk about them. But those guys, they are available on social media. They work not just the government work, more than government work, especially in Al Junaina, therefore, even to build a house against the rain, and work with the people who have cancer, working with the old people, and try to displace people to a safe space, to safe places. And they are heroes. And that's what we ask from the international community to deal with the grassroots movement. They know and they work for 5 years now. It's not just starting with the war. It's happening with the 5 years ago, starting with the revolution started. And when this war starting the first day, they shifting their work, the political active, to be emergency room actors. That's all about them. But even if we talk about them till tomorrow, we will never finish the hero's story of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Wiam. And yes, I think the point to take away from that, there is no lack of people to talk to in Sudan, and people who are meaningful actors doing good work on the ground in Sudan. So the excuse that this is the only people we are able to talk to is really lame one. There is no lack of people and groups that the international community can engage with. I would like to now turn to Reem. We talked about all the negatives, all what is not being done. What is actually being done? Who is intervening to stop this atrocity in Sudan? What players are playing a positive role? right now?
Just to also reiterate what Wiam said, a lot of the humanitarian effort is led by the community, and I think even if the war stops tomorrow, the community will continue to be at the center of this, and this is really a testament to one thing that she said, and I want to reiterate it, is that people have managed to find ways to govern themselves. Communities that are in neighborhoods that are affected by war, that are completely cut off from any services, have found ways to govern themselves and reorganize their lives. They've started soup kitchens so they can all at least eat one meal a day. They've started classes for children. They have found ways to protect each other. And so many mechanisms basically to ensure that the community is healthy, is safe, and continues to be together. So definitely the local committees have shown a lot of bravery and a lot of work. A lot of the funding, I also want to emphasize, a lot of the funding that goes into feeding and making sure that people are doing well, it actually comes from Sudanese people inside Sudan and in the diaspora. So a lot of concerts, a lot of, people basically paying money on a daily basis, a lot of campaigns that people donate to on a regular basis. And so right now, a lot of the humanitarian aid is actually sourced by the community that is supporting each other. I also want to emphasize on the role of like women's groups, that have been doing tremendous work to shed light on the situation. One of them, for example, I would start with, Sulaima, who leads the unit basically on combating violence against women and children. She has been very brave. It's a difficult situation, but she has continued to come out to give us information about the sexual violence that is happening against women. And so many others, local initiatives, such as initiatives to stop sexual violence, has been also trying to document, and not only trying to document and provide psychosocial support, and also provide money for the families to be able to move from the place where this violation happened to a safer place, just so the women are able to heal and are able to get the services that they need. And this work has been tremendous. It's a lot of building an infrastructure to make sure that everything is into place, to make sure that there are people that are able to do this kind of work. And so a lot of people are donating their time and their resources to be able to make sure that the survivors are given another chance and that they are taken to a safer place. Women groups that are also trying to do work at the political level, I also applaud them, because they are continuing to fight, as a system. I mean, war is also the optimum, militarization, so women are not really present, basically, because once there's war, if you don't have a gun, you don't have an opinion, right? So, but they are continuing to press, and they're continuing to really trying to find ways to talk to the sides of the conflict and to find ways to be part of the ceasefire committees when they were happening, and to find ways to just kind of just think about and visualize a new pathway to peace. And through online discussions, through different discussions that are happening. So a lot of work is being done, and a lot of work is being done by women, and a lot of the humanitarian efforts are being led by the communities, and we have to applaud them for that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Reem. And we are at the end of this portion of our panel, but I really want to squeeze one last question, and this time to Hamid. Please, in a minute and a half, tell us who is leading an intervention on the state level, not in Sudan, or regional actors leading intervention right now. We know there is the Jeddah Forum, and we would like you to tell us more about that and who is leading similar positive initiatives to end the war in Sudan.
Sure. So I think there has been internationally a tendency to allow the African Union and the IGAD to lead on the mediation and to lead on resolving the situation in Sudan. And I think that is quite problematic because these very institutions are implicated in what's happening. They are biased and they don't have neither the capacity nor the integrity to do that. And I think the idea that, the notion of African solutions to African problems is invalid here because this is not an African war or an African issue. There are many actors who are part of this who are not African. So I think that has been where most of the issues in terms of the peace process has been happening and why it's been stalling and so on. On the other side, there's been the Jeddah platform, which was convened by Saudi and the US. And I think this was the only platform that has gained some traction. It has been helpful in leveraging, a bit of humanitarian aid to get into the country, to open some humanitarian corridors. Through that, also, international actors were able to secure very short ceasefires for their interests. I would have to say, for evacuating specific UN delegations, specific groups, and so on, or diplomats and so on. So I think that platform has potential to work if more power and more more mediators and different international actors would come to that platform and support it and encourage it, basically, but also for civilians to be part of it, because keeping this cycle of engaging with the military leaders only to solve the power and rewarding warring factions for wars and so on is quite problematic. But I think that platform has all sorts of problems, but has potential, and there's a lot to be done to get it working.
Thank you, Hamid. And we will now turn into the Q&A portion of our panel. I would like to remind all our viewers to use the Q&A section of our Zoom webinar to post a question. And please remember to include your name, your country, and affiliation. So with that, I will turn into our very first question that came from Aline Tayyar from the United Kingdom, who asked, who outside Sudan is fueling this war? We partially covered that, but I would like to throw it to all of you to answer that question. Anyone?
I think Reem did a great job covering that earlier. But just to reiterate, I think the biggest actor outside Sudan that has the biggest influence currently on the sustaining the war in Sudan is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Then to a lesser extent, there are some other actors involved. There's Russia, there's Turkey, there's Egypt, there's Iran, there's Saudi. Different countries have different interests. But I think at present, the main actor that has been playing the largest negative role is the Emirates.
Thank you, Hamid. And we have also...
I want to reiterate on what Hamid said and also mention that right now, the RSF is putting Al-Fashir, the capital of North Darfur state, under siege. And as you know, the RSF controls 4 states out of the 5 states in Darfur. This is the last state, basically. And as a result, the state not only has like 1.2 million people, but also an estimated 500 to 800,000 people who have sought refuge from other parts of Darfur. So we're talking about at least 2 million people, in Al-Fashir. And the RSF has been attacking the city and trying to enter for the past, few weeks. And especially in the past 10 days, they have been doing it almost on a daily basis. They have been launching attacks. And it just so happens that the their planes coming from the UAE to the specific airport in Chad that is supplying the RSF with weapons almost every day over the last 8 days. So it's not a coincidence, right now the city could fall, millions of people are at risk, and the weapons continue to come from the UAE.
All right. Actually, Reem, since you unmuted, stay unmuted because this question is for you specifically from Brendan of Université de Montréal, Canada. He's asking, Reem, you have explained that the war is being waged against the very identity of Sudan and Sudanese people. For what purpose exactly? If destroying this identity is a political goal in itself, beyond making money and looting, why? Why is it happening?
Yes. I mean, it is, I'm trying to give you a short answer because, of course, there is a longer answer about the fact that Sudan itself, I mean, it is a colonial construct, right? It is a number of countries that were brought together, by a colonial force. So the country itself was never very much, I would say, it was never coherent. It was never really well put together. Not only, of course, because what the imperial forces did, but also because of the post-colonial governments that continue to fail. But I think what is very interesting is that the whole narrative of the RSF right now under mouthpieces, they continue to reiterate that this state does not represent them. This identity does not represent them. And they have shown a lot of disdain to a lot of the things that we think are very much Sudanese that bring people together, like the music, for example, that is broadcasted from the main, Omdurman radio. They have shown disdain to a lot of cultural practices that are very much widespread across Sudan. So it is definitely interesting to see that this is a force that has an ideology that is against the identity of the state because they believe that it does not represent them and that it represents certain communities in Sudan. And this is what their claim. So what they are doing, what they do want to do, and this is again reiterating some of the things that I have heard them say over the past few months, is that they want to take over the state and they want to change the entire identity of the state from the flag to the name to the mute to what we listen to everything basically. I think right now it's also important to note, like just what I said earlier about the fact that the nomadic groups that are largely, in the RSF, the nomadic groups from Western Sudan have extensions in different parts of the Sahel. And it so happens that the nomadic groups in the Sahel region are completely impoverished, very poor, living in places where water is very sacred. So they want a homeland. We're talking about people who are minorities in different countries, who are discriminated against, who never felt home. I mean, in Niger, for example, they were kicked out a few years ago, and they want a homeland. They want a homeland, and Sudan has the Nile, it has water, it has, it's different for them. It is definitely something that they want to fight for. So I think we're talking about
listener to explain a little bit the ethnic makeup of these
yeah.
groups. Yes, if you can.
I mean, okay, so generally the RSF, I would say the core groups that are mobilized by the RSF, they are basically cattle herders, from different parts of Western Sudan. So they are nomadic groups, basically, they herd cows and cattle. So those are the core groups that are represented in the RSF, and they are the groups that the RSF has been mobilizing from. Like I said, the groups we're talking about, they're not restricted by colonial borders. They are present all across the Sahel as well as North Africa. So you also find them in Libya, you find them in Morocco, you find them in so on. So they don't believe in borders. They're cousins, they're able to mobilize. And this is why it is not strange to find people coming from Mali to fight for the RSF because they're cousins. And what brings them together is that, like I said, they are minority groups in the different countries and they are discriminated against. And also the Sahel region has a huge problem when it comes to water resources. So we're talking about people whose cattle are dying because they're going thirsty, and they are thirsty themselves. So I think, yeah, there are people that are looking for a homeland, and this has been said and discussed again in many of the conversations that we're hearing online by their mouthpieces that I'm following very closely to understand their motives and also to understand how for them this is an existential war. They're dying in large numbers, but for them this is a war that they will continue fighting until, the last basically member of their community, because they believe that if they don't, then a lot of people will turn against them and they'll become targeted and so on. So a lot of it is really right now is driven by fear of the unknown. So it is an existential war for them.
Thank you, Reem. And just to explain some more for those unfamiliar with the Bedouin communities of Africa, it's yes, often characterized as Arab, but I must note that they don't really subscribe to Arab nationalist in the traditional, nationalism in the traditional sense. They are yes, they find their roots. They can trace their roots to Arabia. And ethnic makeup definitely comes from that part, but they have largely been in that region for hundreds of years and don't really identify, even within Arab countries and Arab nationalist states, they are still outsiders and minorities. In a place like Egypt, you will find the Bedouins in Sinai, completely isolated from the rest of the largely Arab nation. With that, I would like to turn actually to another question, a very interesting one from Beatrice Nicolini, Professor of History and Institutions of Africa at the Catholic University in Milan. Beatrice is asking, could you tell us about A, the role of China, and 2, the role of religious presences? You can take that on, Hamid, or Reem, or Riam, any of you. I think Hamid, you probably would be the most suited for this question, particular.
I think the role of China has been quite subtle and quite ever since the revolution started in 2018. And probably, I think that has been the strategy all through. When there's political instability and political changes and democratic processes and so on, that is not where they like to operate. So they've had obviously Chinese businesses will continue running in the country and so on, but they've had very minimal political engagement with the transitional government after the revolution, unlike the very strong political ties that they had with the regime of al-Bashir. After the war, they continued to play that very quiet and subtle kind of role. Obviously, it's also one of the Chinese tendencies that they don't like to engage in, political matters in a very visible way. And their priority is to safeguard their businesses and their access to, the resources and the lands and the factories and everything that they have in Sudan, but also in the region. And it's very interesting that a lot of Chinese businesses in various areas have kept on running after the war erupted. They made sure that, these interests are safeguarded and so on. But on the political side, I think they've had a very limited role, and they haven't shown any biases, either towards RSF or SAF, mainly to make sure that they are safeguarding, their business and their influence, their commercial influence in that sense. I think when it comes to religion, obviously, as Reem mentioned, the war has taken dimensions that go beyond the power struggle between the armed forces. So there has been a lot of documented attacks specifically on religious minorities, Christians and Coptics and churches, and so on. But also the role of political leaders, and by extension, I would say more, I don't want to use the word traditional, but more native leaders and native administration who have a very religious kind of identity to their roles and so on. And there have been a lot of manipulation, and I think in most cases by the rapid support forces, but also in many other places by the army and so on, to get these leaders to mobilize and to get more fighters to join these groups and so on. But then there have also been a few others who have been playing positive roles in terms of advocating for social cohesion and peace and trying to protect the communities together and so on. And I think it's very much important when we think about the police, a peace process. We think about how do we engage and include these leaders who have very a lot of influence and power on their communities, to make sure that they're not being pushed into political manipulations of the warring factions.
Thank you, Hamid. Our next question, we have a lot of questions already, but yes, please continue submitting your questions and I will do my best to get through all of them. Our next question is from Nadia Sakaf from United Kingdom. I think this is question more for you, Wiam. Nadia says, I read somewhere that Sudan shows a successful story of local communities delivering aid and ensuring security in local neighborhoods. Is this true? Could they be the hope for peace and stability in Sudan? Also, to what extent could civil society and especially women-led organizations bridge between the two Sudans and even between the many fragmented societies now being created inside of the one Sudan? So very multi-layered question. So
yes, but I think there is one answer to give them the access to be in political participation. If they've been in political participation and they can talk to the international community, they can make a lot. Okay, if I understand the question right, I think.
yes,
I'm trying to read it.
Asking are women-led organizations and youth-led organizations could be the answer to bridging these.
Okay, I think, Muhammad, we need to make it clear. The organization in Sudan now during the war is not that systematic organization. It's a local movement and local initiative. That's why we call it grassroots movement. Right. They see what the people need and they start initiative, they start to collect donation and they start to work.
Okay, with that, I turn to Reem for a question from Farah El-Iriani from Romania. Farah is asking, who is covering the news in Sudan? As I hear that the reason we don't know much about it is because the news is controlled by the rapid support forces. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, yes, unfortunately, so in the period after 2019, there was a lot of websites that started. They were registered outside Sudan, and they were showing a lot of disinformation. Some of them were even like connected to Wagner and so on. So, and disinformation is different from misinformation. Misinformation is just like fake news, but disinformation is when the news are manipulated for political purposes. So yes, so they have a lot of news infrastructure before the war, and they also buy a lot of accounts and on Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, and they have been buying a lot of pages that have large numbers of followers. So the RSF has a lot of presence, definitely online, a very strong presence. But I also think there are so many other reasons that the war is not covered as much. One of them is the fact that there are other conflicts, they sometimes they just get more coverage, and also the fact that there's a lot of politics involved in the world of news and news outlets. So it's definitely affected, basically, that Sudan sometimes gets deprioritized as a result. A lot of agencies also don't invest money to send reporters to Sudan and so on, especially that the situation is is unknown, and especially that there's a lot of a lot of telecommunications blackouts that are happening. And the telecommunication blackouts are affecting the journalists in the country, so they are unable to cover the news as they would, the international and the local journalists who have been really struggling to cover the news because of the telecommunications blackouts. And it's also affecting citizen journalists who are a very important voice in sharing the everyday concerns and the everyday struggles in getting their voices out, because sometimes the internet is down for days and sometimes the electricity is out for days, so people don't find ways to connect. So unfortunately, it's an issue of infrastructure, it's an issue of conflict, and it's also an issue of just politics. And like I said, also an issue that the RSF has invested heavily in building a news infrastructure before the war so that they could manipulate the narrative and spread a lot of propaganda.
Thank you, Reem. So the next question, I would like you all to actually take a stab at answering, because it's basically a policy recommendation. Our question comes from Ambassador Anna Block-Massoyer, who is the Special Envoy for Sudan for Sweden. Anna's saying, thank you all, very interesting. How do you think sanctions could help or not? So
I can go first if
Ahmed,
you want.
please.
Yeah, and I think sanctions can be very effective tools. However, pursuing sanctions on their own without a comprehensive strategy is problematic, I think. There is evidence that sanctions that have been used so far had some influence. For instance, there are a lot of reports of how sanctions on the brother of the RSF leader, US sanctions particularly, has kind of, pushed him to engage more with the US and try to get his name off the list. So yeah, sanctions can work. However, when that, you have that influence and so on, but it's not leveraged into a peace process, for instance, and it's not being used as a full strategy and so on, it gets, wasted and it becomes just in vain. Also, sanctions placed in, only sanctioning the Sudanese actors who are leading on the war and so on, without putting serious measures and sanctions on their regional and international backers is also quite problematic, because if you sanction all leaders in Sudan, all of the generals in Sudan, but they're still being supported from outside, and no one is holding the international backers to account, we are not going to get anywhere.
Thank you.
Yes,
sorry.
I agree. Sanctions are very important. I think it's also about, sometimes you cannot use the same sanctions on different people. So yesterday, for example, we saw US sanctions on 2 individuals from the RSF, but they're likely never going to go to the US, start bank accounts there, and so on. One of them probably have not heard of the US, a very low level kind of field, field leader. So I think you cannot use the same, method for different, so definitely on the Deglu brothers or on the generals who have business interests, it is very important to sanction them. But like Hamid said, it's part of a mechanism, right? So you're sanctioning them so that they can go to the table to sit down and negotiate. So if you do sanction them and this does not happen, then I think we need other mechanisms. We need other mechanisms. We have to talk about justice. We have to talk about immunity. We have to talk about other things that maybe they care about more. So I think it's definitely important to just figure out, how they can, how to really pressure them and find ways to pressure them. Some people want to be paid off, so I think we have to think about what they want, really, and the same method cannot work for everyone. So I think this is important. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to add, not all sanctions are created equal.
Well, Mohammed, if can I add something? The section, I'm agree with Reem and Hamid, but I want to say something. Here in East African countries, they denied us from receiving any money, and they say there is action in Sudan, and it's like it's been a section of all Sudanese. sanctions should be more clear. It's against the leaders, against the political people, not against against sorry, against Sudanese people, because even we cannot receive any aid from outside. And I agree with Reem. If you want to put sanction, you do it in the key factors. There is a gold faction. There's a lot of things. Yes, why you didn't put sanction on that?
Exactly. Not all sanctions are created equal. Some have immeasurable unintended consequences, as every Sudanese will tell you, their own trauma with sanctions. We have been born under sanctions. Most of us, most people alive today in Sudan, just think about it, have been born while Sudan was comprehensively sanctioned. And yeah, it's a word that brings with it a lot of trauma. But we also acknowledge the role of sanctions in ending the atrocities in Darfur back in and or reducing them significantly. We do know they can work, but only when thoughtfully done, and is not just a policy, a lazy policy, but more of a tactic to get specific results, starting with designation of Sudan gold as blood gold, and perhaps invoking strong sanctions like global Magnitsky sanctions against states who are actively benefiting from this blood gold, could be a very powerful way to for the international community to stop the war. We are almost at the top of the hour, but I would like to give all of you an opportunity to give final words. We might be able to go a little bit over time. So I would like to, in that case, to also squeeze a little bit one question that I found quite interesting from Lako Tongan from Pritzker College, United States, is asking two questions. One for Hamid. Can you elaborate or discern the ideological orientations of the two sides? Because it's unclear a little bit what kind of Sudan they each envision. And two, and I'll ask the questions together, and it can guide your closing remarks for all of you. Internal conditions always create pathways for external involvements. Can you all identify the various groups and alliances which pursue their various objectives? For example, the SPLM North, reviving Garang's ideas of New Sudan. So you can choose to make that your guiding question or not for your closing remarks. But at this point, I would like to give each of you an opportunity to say last words. So let's start with you, Hamid, since you have the first, question. You have the question directed at you.
Sure. So in terms of ideology of both warring factions, I think Reem spoke a lot about the RSF spikes specifically, and what kind of incentives and ideas they have, particularly around that they've been marginalized, that the state in the central state does not represent them, and so on. So this dynamic about marginalization and so on. Although, as Reem said, a lot of these people, also the extended tribes and so on, are historically marginalized and so on. But I think probably the way this narrative is being perpetuated and so on is quite problematic. And also on the other side, there is the Islamists who are in so many ways having very strong influence on the army. And every day that influence increases because, as also Reem mentioned earlier, the army has failed to get supporters internationally, but also from key political groups nationally. So getting the influence, more support from the Islamists is very important to them. But I think honestly, personally, I think both leaders, I don't think they really care for any ideologies. They are hungry for power, and whatever ideology works for them to kind of sustain this war and to advance and so on, they would use it. So that's why I think they're not very genuine about either of these ideologies. As you know, very closing and final remarks, I think I would say I would reiterate the point about supporting grassroots groups and empowering them in the humanitarian response, but also in political participation in peace processes and future political processes and so on. But I think also viewing that the mutual aid groups and the initiatives that they're leading are not only about the humanitarian assistance that they're providing. This mutual aid and the way it's being practiced in Sudan is an act of political participation in itself. It's an act of resistance in itself. So that is very important to empower so that the Sudanese people could keep on having some agency in these very difficult times. I think also it's very important that all international actors accelerate their action and act very quickly to protect the people of Al-Fashir. There is no time left, and the risks are massive. It's imminent, and a lot needs to be done before we see yet another genocide before our eyes. The documentation is there, the facts are there, so that we need to see more serious action, particularly about civilian protection. And I think in that sense, there are two issues that I could highlight in terms of taking civilian protection more seriously and holding the warring factions to account. Extending the arms embargo across the country. There's an arms embargo now in Darfur. It needs to be extended across the country, and it needs to be fully implemented because there are no mechanisms following that up and so on. Then, as also was mentioned earlier, that impunity is at the heart of this war, and this war builds on a history of impunity where warring generals do not get held to account and so on. So that is very important to take into account. And in that regard, I think the international facts-finding mission that was established last year is being seriously underfunded. They're not being able to recruit people, staff. They're not being able to establish their offices and so on. And I think that should be a priority for the international facts-finding mission to be supported so that we could have the facts and documentations to pursue justice and to end the culture of immunity.
Thank you so much, Hamid. And with that, I will turn to Wiam for final remarks.
Sudan war, it's demographic change, and it's war against Sudanese people. And my last thing, I'm gonna say it's a black war, but we will never draw in the dark, and we will never disappear in the dark. And we will continue fighting for our life, and we will continue be loud, even if we die from hungry. And just keep eyes on Sudan. We will win. We will get our life back. Thank you.
Thank you, Wiam. Reem?
I mean, I think this war has really, should make people understand that Sudan's problem is not the fact that there's a power struggle between the military and politicians. It is a crisis in the formation of the state itself. I mean, we're talking about a country that has been, the first rebellion began in 1955, even before we gained our independence from the UK or the British Empire at the time. So I think this is a time for us to really reconsider, the viability of the Sudanese state, and to really reconsider the fact that why are there so many rebellions against the state? Why are there so many people, calling for things such as, abolishing the Arabic language and replacing it with Swahili, having a secular state, so many things, and changing the identity of the state and so on. I think we have to talk about it as Sudanese people in a very serious way. That, what do people want? And will people stop fighting for the control of the state and to change the identity of the state? Because if this does not stop, then the war is not going to stop, even if the war between the RSF and the SAF stops, because the community right now is so polarized, is so hurt by this war, and so traumatized by this war, that we have to have a serious discussion to really decide how we can live together again as one country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reem. Thank you to all our speakers for being here and all our attendees. And I'm sorry I couldn't get to all your questions. But thank you for showing up. And reminding us that we are not alone, even if international political will and media may imply that Sudan is completely forgotten. With that, I will turn to the CMED team, specifically to Salome, for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed, Reem, and Hamid for helping our audience understand what's going on in Sudan today. And we hope this discussion helps to activate more people around the world. Thank you to our team today who helped pull off the webinar, Professor Zipperstein, Laura Lee, and Emily Pistoli. And last but not least, thank you to the audience for joining us. I know it's very late in the day for some of you around the world. We hope you will join us again for our next webinar, which is happening on June 5th. There is information on the screen for you. We are in the early stages of planning Israel and Palestine, what's happening next, where we headed. So if you scan this QR code, you can find information eventually. And if you are interested in keeping up with CMED events, you can join our mailing list by scanning this QR code or sending us an email at cmed@international.ucla.edu. And that is all for today. Thank you to all and have a great day.